Thank you, sir. I now invite Chief Commissioner of Income Tax, Vijayawada, Sri Radhakrishna Sripada, to please welcome Minister of State Finance, Dr. Bhagwat Kishan Rao Karad, with a sapling. Thank you, sir. Shubham karoti kalyanam, arogyam dhan sampada, shatru buddhi vinashaya, deep jyoti namastute. Invoking the blessings of the higher powers as we commence this event, I request all the dignitaries on the dais to please light the ceremonial lamp. Thank you, everyone. I would now invite Honorable Union Finance Minister, Srimati Nirmala Sitharaman, to deliver the keynote address. Okay, ma'am. Right, ma'am. I request Commissioner of Income Tax, Srimati K. Harita, to kindly moderate the interactive session.
Thank you, Manisha. Honorable Madam, Union Finance Minister and Minister of Corporate Affairs, Honorable Ministers of State, and respected dignitaries. We have with us today various representatives of business associations, trade bodies, chambers of commerce, along with eminent business personalities, entrepreneurs, startup founders, and other leaders representing a cross-section of our business and finance sectors, including many women achievers. Also present are the officers of the direct and indirect tax administration of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana regions. Before we commence the interactive session, all the speakers are humbly requested to be brief in putting their questions, considering the time constraints involved. Also, a gentle request to please avoid any repetitive questions and to keep the questions restricted to the announcements made in the annual budget 2023. Madam, I now seek your permission to start the interactive session. I now invite our first speaker, Srimati Ramadevi Kannaganti, Founder and President, Association of Lady Entrepreneurs of India.
Thank you, ma'am, for giving this opportunity. First, for giving it to women entrepreneurs. We highly appreciate the initiative taken by the ministry during the budget sessions, which announced its lot of advantage to MSME sector. What we consider is the Amrit Kal for MSME sector, ma'am. In fact, I happened to be in dialogue with a lot of TVs. I said, any budget allocation is done, the impetus will be to the sector wise. It will not be the direct effect, but indirectly the effect is there. Particularly the infrastructure you announced and food processing sector when you announced Sri Anna scheme for millet-based and also green technologies and startup programs which are announced in the budget shows the commitment of government, and we highly appreciate this, ma'am. But the other aspect which we would like to Madam and her team to be considered is with regards to NPAs happening in our MSME sector. And also there is a lot of demand in that sector because banks are also finding it difficult. Another aspect which I was thinking, our team was thinking is with regards to revival of SLIC, ma'am. There is no mechanism which addresses the sick units. So we used to have SLIC. I happen to be there in this line since 29 years with a very good organization support. And we have taken a lot of support from Government of India. We are part of Niti Aayog and part of many ministries. MSME sector, this grievance mechanism is not there. So SLIC revival to be considered is the request. And Sri Shakti Smart Card, because we are now, even we are hosting G20, inclusive growth is one aspect which we are focusing as a government, and our Honorable Prime Minister is focusing on reaching to the last mile and reaching to the last deprived community. Women in the unorganized sector are not able to access credit. So announcing as Sri Shakti as a smart card which will enable many women to participate in this economic activity. The unorganized becomes organized. They get into the banking also. I request ma'am to consider this aspect of inclusive growth for women entrepreneurs. Another I'm not just complaining, ma'am, but these are the issues which are really hurting us and which are paving roadblocks for the growth. This thing is the Delayed Payment Act, which need to be implemented. We are not able to take advantage of Parliament enactment. I request to consider this. And now in the process of digitalization, we are now converted because we are a non-profit organization under Section 8. There is a lot of PFMS issues which we are facing, which is delaying the whatever government is providing. There are various schemes and there's so much integrated mechanism which is happening with all the ministries, but the system of PFMS is not streamlined. I request that we streamlined and so that we get into it with a growth path. And simplification of credit mechanism is also one thing which is, there's a cumbersome procedures, and even the application is also, they are not mentioning about the commitment which a banker is giving. So we'd like bankers to consider, have a system which is simplified. Startups are encouraged, ma'am. We are also part of Niti Aayog under Atul Incubation Mission, Startup India Seed Fund, and METI and other startups. There's a wonderful impact. The country is moving forward into innovation. But the grants which are given by the government under Section 194B of Income Tax Act stipulates that any winnings above 10,000 are subject to 30% TDS. So this is one announcement made by the government under startup promotion is to encourage to encourage innovation. It is not in line when we deduct 30% under TDS. Please do consider startups because that's the area where we
what
have
is that? 30% of what?
TDS. The government
what is TDS, ma'am?
Government, when they announce programs for startups, they get under challenge, startup challenge, they win some kind of prize money. That prize money is again 30% goes towards TDS.
TDS, right, ma'am?
Yes.
It's not a new tax on them?
It's not a new
they
tax.
They can always reconcile it with the taxation that they pay anyway?
Yeah.
It's not an additional tax.
It's not additional, ma'am, but we are supposed to give it to the startup, but deducting TDS, we are paying it. Startup doesn't have any mechanism.
I understand that, but somebody has to pay, ma'am. Sorry. And you're not paying as an additional tax. You're going to reconcile to your tax which has got to be paid otherwise. It's not an additional tax.
It's an incentive for their challenge.
You
ma'am.
give
So
30 to extra to the startup if you're so benevolent,
we are
ma'am,
not
but I'm
giving,
sorry
ma'am,
to say
it's
it.
you are, I mean, the
The
government is
30%
giving.
tax is not an additional tax, it's a TDS. I wish you
Yes,
appreciate that.
yes, ma'am. Please do encourage the startups, particularly women entrepreneurs in agri sector. The budget is also paving that way for agri entrepreneurs. We appreciate this initiative of government because rural entrepreneurship is taking forward with the technology and everything. We are moving forward. We thank all the initiatives taken in the budget. Only cluster approach is towards the state government, ma'am. So there is some kind of lacuna in this implementation of this project because states needs to work with the central government and we are finding it little difficult. Just a few suggestions, ma'am. Thank you.
Ma'am, before you, of course, you're welcome to take your seat, but I would request, and through my comments to someone who's been in the field of the MSME for a long time here in this region, I would appeal to all of you. When you're talking about tax, particularly when you're talking about TDS, you're all in the field for a very long time. I appeal to all of you all to explain the motive as to why we have a TDS and TCS objectives. They are not new tax. And people like you, ma'am, who are so experienced in the ground and working together with organizations, where this government is doing absolutely a lot of exercise, maybe many more is required to promote industry. We are also wanting to formalize the economy. Transactions happen, we don't know where the money goes. With the TDS, what we try to send as a message is at least we'll know who's the giver, who's the taker. And both giver and taker, wherever necessary, you're going to pay the tax. And at that time, you're going to reconcile this. So people who have an area of influence, like yourself, Mrs. Ramadevi, I would request you to speak for methods and measures which are being taken up by the government to formalize the economy. And if you start appealing saying, TDS, ma'am, this country will never get formalized, ma'am.
Kind reminder to all. In view of the time constraint, please be precise and concise.
1 minute. There are some things on which FS would like to explain things.
Firstly, you made the point about delayed payments and the enforcement under the MSME Act. Of course, that's a matter under the Ministry for Micro and Small and Medium Industries. But there's one significant announcement which was made in this budget, which I'm not sure whether you have noticed because you didn't mention it. An amendment is being brought to the Income Tax Act by which if payment is not made within the due time to an MSME, then that amount cannot be deducted by the paying organization until payment is already made. So this is a strong incentive for bigger companies to pay on time, because if they don't pay on time, this expense will be disallowed until such time as it is paid. So perhaps it was not noticed, so I'm just bringing that up, number one. Number two, you have mentioned issues with the PFMS. So I'll be grateful if you can give me specific instances, if you can give it to the organizers, they will get it to me. Specific instances of where you feel your payments are being delayed through the PFMS. I presume you're referring to central government payments. Central government payments. So can you give me specific examples of where you are feeling this problem? If you can kindly give it, we'll take note of it.
We move forward. Just a kind reminder, kindly be precise and concise in view of the time constraints. The many are patiently waiting for their turn. We'll move on to our next speaker, ma'am. Shri Suresh Kumar Singhal, Vice President, Federation of Telangana Chambers of Commerce and Industry, and Managing Director, Vijay Iron Foundry, is our next speaker.
Madam, under the ease of doing business, following to be considered. GST on the scrap procured by the manufacturer should be brought under reverse charge mechanism. Amnesty for one-time settling interest and penalties for year 17-18 and 18-19 arising out of technical glitches and procedural lapse to be provided. Madam, thank you.
you have something to say?
This is under GST, the amnesty scheme that you are wanting?
One-time
For-
technical glitches between 17, 18 and 19.
Well, these are primarily, not budget related, but both these issues, because GST, you are aware, now there is the council. So this demand is there, with us on scrap to have, but then there is not only steel scrap. Please keep that in mind. While the request is with us, there is other scrap also. They are also not in reverse charge. So we have to look at, the other scrap other than steel scrap. So we have noted your requests and we will put it up, before the GST Council.
But have you, please have your memorandum or any note that you have prepared passed on to the organizers on this matter of the technical glitches you said in the GST, asking for amnesty. Do send the request.
We'll send.
Our next question is from Ms. Shubhra Maheshwari, Chairperson, FICCI Ladies Organization and Director, Blue Stones Group.
Good afternoon, Madam. Thank you so much for your time. Madam, a small question. Companies are taxed at 25%, whereas partnerships and LLPs are effectively charged at 34%. Can this be helped? And individuals with income above 2 crores are effectively charged at 39%, wherein when we compare to companies, it's just 25. So can something be done about this? And the limit of 10 crore, which is on long-term capital gains, can that be increased? Because earlier it was unlimited and now it is 10 crores.
Sanjay?
Well, there is actually, please, try to appreciate that when we tax companies, vis-a-vis, when we tax individuals or associations of persons or trusts, there is a significant difference. Because companies, they get taxed twice. Persons do not get taxed twice. So, wanting a parity between persons, individuals on one hand, or trusts on one hand, and companies on the other hand is not fair. And this is not only true for India, this is true, all across you will find the world that companies always are taxed at lower rates, persons are taxed at higher rates, and along with person, association of persons, trusts, because they don't suffer double taxation, they are taxed, at a higher rate. Your second, and we have already reduced it, please keep in mind, of course you mentioned it, we reduced it, this time for the highest, the marginal rate has been reduced from about 43% to 39% in the budget. The 10 crore limit that you are saying for capital gains, see, this is basically a measure to promote. Again, there was a request, I am tempted, I did not comment earlier, this request came in, not to have a TDS on winnings. We want it for taxation purposes, see, from taxation purposes, income is income. But we want, exemptions or promotions or promotional measures or incentives, whether, it is for savings, whether it is for insurance, for provident fund. Now you are saying, for housing. So this is basically a promotional measure for housing which has been introduced. So one thing, I would like all of you to kindly deliberate upon is that whether giving incentives in an indirect way, because income, as I said, is income, and so, we would like that it should be taxed, irrespective of, the expenditures that you are doing on various things. So, similarly, this has been an exemption which is given for basically housing sector for the lower classes. Now, 10 crore is already, a very, very large limit. This is an exemption, please keep in mind, to promote. And so, I think 10 crore itself is also, quite a high amount. Thank you.
I now invite.
Just to supplement on the company versus partnership point, because this keeps coming again and again. You mentioned the tax rate on a partnership. After that, that income is not again taxed in the hands of the partner. But the dividend distributed by a company is again taxed in the hands of a shareholder. So actually from a tax point of view, people would be more advantageous in a partnership even now, even with the so-called differential that you are citing. So it's not actually a valid comparison.
I now invite Shri Ravi Kumar Narra, National President, Dalit Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, to present his query.
Thank you, Madam, for your support for financial inclusion. In this budget, Saptarishi, the first priority was given to the financial inclusion. And we also thank you for extending the Stand Up India program up to 2025. And we're also thankful to you for taking a review on the quantum of amount funded for the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe entrepreneurs. And after your review, Madam, there was a lot of movement among the bankers. But my request is that at higher level, there is a sensitization is taken place. But at lower level, because ultimately the decision maker is the branch manager. So the country has got more than 137,000 branches. So these branch managers has to be sensitized on the implementation of the program, and that will have a more good positive results. And also, when the scheme was introduced in 2016 by your government, Madam, the takeoff has taken some time, but now that it is speeded very rapidly, it is the response is coming from these two communities. And at the time, banking charges were very less. But now, over a period of time, the banking charges are increasing drastically, and it has become a very expensive financial assistance scheme being extended to scheduled caste and scheduled tribe entrepreneurs. Example, the following charges are levied by one of the largest bank. The interest rate is high as 11.80%, Madam, whereas at the time of introduction, it was 10.25. But now, over a period of time, because of the increase in bank charges and all, so it has increased to 11.8. And the processing fees was not there earlier. Now they are charging 0.4% plus GST. And also upfront fees of 1.40% plus GST also now being charged. And in addition to that, at the time of introduction, there was no inspection charges to be collected by the banker. But whereas now, randomly, the 15,000 rupees per annum is being charged. So these things we request is to roll back to the 2016 rules and regulations of sanctioning the funding, Madam. So that will go a long way. And yeah. So this program, now the bankers are trying to do very minimum amount, Madam. Though the amount is targeted as 1 CR is the maximum. So for the purpose of giving the loan, they are downsizing the project cost, and they wanted to do it in 17 lakhs, 18 lakhs. Even now the average funding, if you take this thing, it is only 17 lakh rupees for average funding. Last time in your review meeting, you also mentioned about the quantum of the amount which is being supported for SC/STs, but still that this thing is there, Madam. And also the bankers have got the stigma of collateral security, Madam. So that they without collateral, I don't know, the mind block what they have in the bankers. Even if the government is giving so many collaterals, CGSSI is there, CGTMS is there, but the banker never feel that as a guarantee. So for that, the mind block has to be removed from the bankers. So that is every entrepreneur is facing, not only the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe entrepreneurs, all MSME sector is facing. Even in CGTMSC also, Madam, though you have increased the amount, we are very thankful for that. But at the same time, we should also fix a target to give SC/ST communities under CGTMSC also. Because this limit is up to 2 crores. But when we go and approach the banker says, you have got only Stand Up India, and the Stand Up India is up to 1 crore only. So some percentage of allotment under CGTMSC also must be focused on funding the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe entrepreneurs. Thank you very much, Madam, for the support. And in the Indian history, in the 75 years of Indian independent history, the Stand Up India is the greatest initiative financial inclusion program for the SC/ST communities. Thank you for your support.
Thank you. On the CGTMS, I need to have a review of actually if there's been a inadvertent exclusion of SC and ST. Because most often when I review it, the allocations for different or dispersal for different categories are normally reviewed. But if you feel that SC and STs have not really benefited from the CGT MSA, I need to review it. I will review, but I also want Secretary, Department of Financial Services to address some of the issues that you've raised.
Some of the issues raised by Ravi Kumarji. Some of the issues raised by Ravi Kumarji relates to interest rate and processing fees rate, etc. Actually, these are decided by the bank boards, and certainly since he has pointed out, we will speak with them and see what can be done. With regard to ma'am, you mentioned about this
Did you know that learning Microsoft
spoken about
that
it?
I'm not sure about.
Incidentally,
because-
I just want to make a minor point here.
Ma'am,
I
actually,
assume
I
that
just
you are
had a
buying
question.
certain things on which you pay GST.
Correct, yes.
And you are presumably adding some value to it.
Right.
It's not that you are simply buying X and selling X. You must be adding there's something that you are doing which adds value. If you were taxable, that would also be taxed at the same rate. So actually what the final purchaser would pay will increase if you are taxed, rather than when you are exempted. When you are exempted, you are paying only on the inputs. There is no tax on your value addition, and you are not paying this tax. The buyer from you is paying the tax. It affects your pricing, it affects your competitiveness. But the final payer, this is an indirect tax borne by the person who's buying it from you, because you're having to raise your price to that extent because you're bearing a GST. If you were taxed on your value added, there would be a GST on the value addition also. So it's not obvious whether this will actually improve the competition. I'm just making a theoretical point.
Yeah, no, we had this discussion with the department also. So what they said was to raise it.
Actually, it's the same thing as in different way. I want to ask you, if you pay GST on your inputs, that becomes your cost, and you put the cost and your own value added, and you raise an invoice on your supplier, on your purchaser. So you are a vendor and you raise a bill. Now you are not showing any GST there.
Right.
So how you are saying that he is not willing to pay GST? Because there is no GST you have levied on your bills and invoices.
Yeah, so just to clarify, the animal portion that we supply doesn't carry the GST, but the feed and bedding that they buy from us, right, that carries the GST on there, right? So, but however, the difference there is we are absorbing that. That is point number one. Point number two, there is only so much we can keep adding to the product, right? At a certain point, the cost becomes so high that they're not willing to take it up also. So not everything can be loaded onto the client, onto the customer base also. And this is a discussion we've had 3 or 4 times with the department also, and they said, this has to go through, like Madam said, big cycle has to happen. And it has to go through different ministries and they have to come to an agreement.
All right, you do give your representation. We'll see what we can do.
Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Professor Prasanna Tantri, Professor at ISB.
Thanks for the opportunity, ma'am. I have only one question. This is relating to that access to credit, that announcement you made, information aggregators for first-time borrowers or poor. My question is, has the government thought about how this will be established? There's a lot of research in the academia about access to credit, and we are working on, for instance, PM Swanidhi, and we are doing a survey working with Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. And what we're finding is that 10,000 rupees that is given is creating a marginal product of 30 to 40%. In some cases, 50, 60%. So is there some scope for academia to work with the government on this topic of creating this information aggregator? Because information asymmetry is the #1 problem why those people are not getting. That's all. Thanks a lot.
Now I call upon Professor Apurva Javadekar, Professor ISB.
Thank you, ma'am, for the opportunity. So I have one question relating to a suggestion or the idea that was floated, I guess, a couple of years back, that government could go and borrow from foreign markets. I mean, FPIs are coming and investing in government securities here, but there was a idea to go and borrow directly from foreign markets that there was no discussion about it afterward. So is government thinking about trying to go actively in the foreign markets? The reason I ask this question is that one academic research has found that multipliers of government spending are way higher if government borrows a little bit from abroad, because then private banking can cater to the domestic corporates much better. And second, right now, the banking sector is providing good amount of credit over the last 6, 7, 8 months. So the liquidity in the banking system is down already. So if we go like this for another 7, 8, 10 months, might be there will be a case of little bit of crowding out for the private sector. That's the sense. But so my question comes from that perspective. Thank you. And I just wanted to give a big congratulations to you on pivoting the expenditure from welfare schemes towards capex, which is very hard to do in country like India. So that was very welcome a change we saw in the budget. So thank you for that. Thank you. Congratulations.
Actually, on your question, by now you must have seen the very interesting ways in which the FSS answered it in different fora. But you're lucky he's here. He'll give you the same spiced up answer for it.
So, I think one very specific part of your question is, are we proposing to issue foreign currency denominated sovereign government securities? The answer is no. And the reason is that, yes, there are some benefits, but there are also some negative effects. And the negative effects are in the region of Atmanirbharta, sovereignty, exposure to risks which are non-Indian, and there is a lot of worldwide experience on this, so there is a risk and there is a return. And in this very volatile world where we have seen that even central bank money can be stopped by a foreign country for political reasons. So this is not a very simple question of yields alone, number one. Number two, we are already open to foreign portfolio investment in rupee-denominated securities. So that it's not as if the crowding out will happen because foreign money doesn't come in. Foreign money is coming in the rupee-denominated securities market.
I now request...
Some reason he is not spiced his answer here.
I now request...
Oh, just a minute.
Yes.
Ma'am, if I may add about the banking credit by the banks, you are right that this advances are increasing, but at the same time we are keeping, RBI is keeping a close watch on the slippage ratio, etc., which are very less these days. And we are aware that since banks are doing well, there may be chances of slippage. So all the banks and RBI are keeping a close watch on this.
I now request Dr. BVR Mohan Reddy, Vice Chairman NASSCOM, Founder and Executive Chairman Cyient Limited, to present his question.
Good afternoon to you, Honorable Nancy. Thank you very much for sparing time. It's a new reflection of how government towards people, opposed towards the governance. And congratulations on the comprehensive and inclusive budget you presented. I'll confine my question or suggestions into the area of startups right now. Madam, you have done extremely well in terms of ensuring that the 10-year income tax is extended by a year, outstanding. Losses can be extended from 7 years to 10 years. You've also created a new fund for the agricultural sector. And ease of doing business, number of processes from 34,000 have come down to 3,400. But my issue is relating to angel tax. That's one of the things which has been bothering the startup community. I'm sure you're aware it came in 2012. Your government has been quite kind to us in terms of providing certain amount of clarifications. But in the 2023 budget, it says the foreign investments will also come under the gambit of the angel tax. That it is already creating some amount of challenges, because in the very early stages of startup community, money comes from high net worth individuals, friends and family and so on and so forth, who are not exempt at this point of time, except if this starter goes and gets a certification done by DPIIT, which we have not seen, though there are about 84,000 startups which are registered under DPIIT. But the people who've been qualified under that interministerial board, as it's called, under that program, is a fairly small percentage of it. So my first submission to you is about easing the process in which the investments could come into the startups and getting a clarity in terms of foreign investments, because is it high net worth individuals or it foreign institutional investors? We are not still clear about it. The second suggestion, Madam, I have is about ESOPs. We've been requesting some more amount of easing of the ESOPs for the startup community. The startup community ESOPs, they're paying the tax twice when they're investing with people, and then when they're selling it, the 2 times the tax is coming by, which is fairly burdensome. In several instances, when the companies have done well, Of course, the taxes have gone all the way up to about 42% because it comes as part of the personal income tax. The third suggestion I have is if we can probably put together a time-bound program for mergers and acquisitions, because we are seeing a fairly large amount of consolidation happening in the startup community. Going to the NCLT and getting it done is a fairly cumbersome process. Madam, we have also, other suggestion I have is a fairly large number of incentives for these startups, but can we create a single platform in which people can register, primarily saying that we can improve on the ease of doing business? My last suggestion is, right now the onus rests on the startup company to prove who is investing. The credibility of the investor rests with the startup. As opposed to that, can we change the process? These are some of the things that I have, because I should acknowledge the startup community is doing extremely well. Courtesy your government, madam, especially the amount of acceleration we have seen in the last 4 to 5 years is never been seen before. We believe it has to continue to be in that way, and your help will be very grateful to your help. Thank you.
Two things. One, annual tax, you have yourself clarified, it is not, on the startups which are registered with DPIIT. DPIIT is aware that this process of certification through the interministerial board is taking time. They have increased the number of boards to 10-fold from about 2 months ago, and we have started to see the results of faster certification of startups. Previously, there were only about 400 startups out of the 84,000 that you mentioned, which were recognized through this. In the last 1 month, they have increased it to 1,200. So, in 1 month itself, 800 have been recognized. And so they are in the process of, expediting this process of recognition. ESOPs, you are aware that we have already given a favorable regime to the startups. I am not aware as to what other additional measures you are wanting. We have already, you are aware that we give them a deferral of tax for the startups, either, when they quit, or 5 years, or when they actually sell it. So, the government is, certainly very keen that we keep promoting the startup ecosystem. Thank you.
I think you also might have seen that in this budget, FM has announced that an agriculture startup accelerator fund will be set up to encourage agri startups by young entrepreneurs in the rural areas also. That's all I wanted to say.
Next, I call upon Srimati Jyotsna Cheruvu, President, Confederation of Women Entrepreneurs of India, Telangana Chapter, and Director, CMAC India Private Limited.
Hello. Good afternoon, ma'am, and respected sir sitting on the dais. Making India as a manufacturing hub is the dream of this government. So in this process, I would like to ask the respected people that internationalization of rupee, how it would help us, because we are, like I was a manufacturer, I have both imports as well as exports. So this would definitely help us go into the more international market more freely. And another thing is if I have to compete with international players, especially from China, the international lending rates at which they are having and the way they are giving the prices, whatever we do, we are unable to give that price. So the lending rates for MSMEs, how that can be helped us. You are giving more outlay, but the lending rate, if I see what I was paying last year to what I'm paying the bank this year for the CC facilities I have, has increased by 2%. So that is one thing. And another point which we would like to ask is, for MSMEs, there is a credit outlay which has increased, but the infrastructural outlay for the industrial parks in terms of providing R&D facilities And in terms of providing more of skill development centers in the industrial parks, and also providing some common facility centers which we can use, because as an MSME, I may not have the facility to set up my own R&D. So if government can invest in such kind of things, it would be definitely helpful for all of us, sir. So these are a few of the things we would like to have. Thank you.
On your last point about common facility centers, there is an ongoing 5-year scheme in the Ministry of MSME for which funding is being provided, and there is money in this budget too. They are doing this in a certain number of places. I don't have the figures with me. On the internationalization of the rupee, I don't think that will directly have an impact on your domestic borrowing costs. That is still at the stage where it is used primarily for bilateral trade with certain countries. And in any case, that is not likely to directly impact your borrowing costs.
One is, that's a different aspect, internationalization. And the another thing is, when we compete in the international market, the lending at which the other countries
That's
get.
fine. Their labor costs may be different, your interest costs may be different. One has to look at competitiveness on all factors of production put together. Yeah. So we cannot take one element and compare only that. Our rupee has depreciated, which is very favorable for exporters. So there are many pluses and minuses. Yeah. It's an equation in which we'll have to see all the elements. But I think there are also schemes where the government has given a lot of emphasis on reducing the cost of borrowing relatively for MSMEs compared to the cost of borrowing for others. And that has also been strengthened in this budget.
Thank you.
But I think there's also, I'm saying this off the cuff, but subject to correction, if MSMEs service their account well and in time, if they repay, there is a subsidy offered. You may want to check up if you're not familiar with it. I'll try to ask the MSME and send it back to you. But if MSMEs service their loans well, I think there is a subsidy given on the interest rate as well. Let me check it up and come back to you.
I now request Shri Hanumandalu, Founder and Senior Member, Telangana Chamber of Commerce and Industry, to raise his query.
Hello. Good afternoon, madam. With regarding the steps taken by the government for formalizing the economy and ease of doing business, there is a possibility of intellectual possibility of automatic sharing of information by many regulators. So, in this regard, what we suggest is there are different statements need to be prepared and filed periodically with regulators applicable to them. There will be differences due to many accounting standards, computations, which may lead to confusion, may lead to reconciliation, may lead to dispute. Also, now the government is proposing to share the information automatically among various regulators through a common portal. There are different methods of valuations for different regulators, different accounting standards, different computations, different valuations, different statements, and different kinds of taxation. We suggest single periodical return applicable for all regulators of income tax, GST, financial institutions, capital market, international transactions, corporate affairs. Financial statements prepared based on common accounting standards, common information, common financial statements, uniform reporting standards will be useful for all regulators so that it will give uniformity for all results, madam. And another thing is taxpayers' welfare, madam. One suggestion. There are so many people who earn a lot and pay good taxes. And after become senior citizens, they may not be in a position to take care of their health and financial commitments also. In that regard, what we suggest is the government is taking care of many lower income group people through social welfare schemes. And employees are taken care of by their pension method. But every taxpayer's welfare has to be taken care of by the government since he has paid the tax to the government as and when he earned income. For this purpose, some portion of the actual tax payment made by the individual payers has to be kept aside as a deposit, which can be used to pay as annuity healthcare expenditure to look after the welfare of the taxpayers after attaining the senior citizenship of 60 years, disability of income, or discontinuation of source of income. I think this will help the taxpayers who have paid the taxes based on the actual payments of taxes, madam. This is my size. Thank you, madam.
May I ask a counter question to him? Do you not want, all senior citizens, irrespective of whether they are paying tax or not, to be looked after, the way you are wanting the taxpayers to be looked after they stop paying taxes? I mean, the government would like to give, equal, similar benefits to all. And I think all citizens should perhaps, strive for that. All senior citizens, so irrespective of whether they have paid or tax, so all citizens, senior citizens should get, now in this budget, you would all be aware that for senior citizens, we have raised the limit of 15 lakh senior citizen deposit scheme from 15 lakh to 30 lakh. It is irrespective of whether, one has paid a tax or not.
You see, so, sir, my opinion is, for employees, there is employees, PFC taking care of and retirement is also beneficial there. But whereas for taxpayers, if some portion of the tax, just like 40 years back, there was compulsory deposit scheme was there, income tax. And if that the same, maybe some portion, 5%, 10% of the tax may be kept aside to look after the corpus fund to meet his annuity after 60 years of age. Need not be paid to him, at least to meet his healthcare expenditure and compulsory expenditures.
Only his or the others also who have not paid the tax?
It doesn't have to be him.
But it can also be for others,
yes.
other non-taxpayers also.
Only for taxpayers, income taxpayers.
Only the income taxpayers.
Individual income taxpayers.
I'm saying it should be for all, no? Why only for the income taxpayers?
Because they paid the tax, they earned and paid the tax, they contributed for the exchequer.
So we pay tax, we all pay tax according to our means. That way, tomorrow you will start saying, that someone, who has paid, 40, there was a comment, that someone is paying, higher tax, 40%. So they should, perhaps then have, better services because they have paid more taxes.
But sometimes what is happening, sir,
okay, fine. I mean, yeah. So
after a period of gap of so many years, his income may be changed or he may become disabled also. And sometimes financial position also may disturb. That may cause a lot of inconvenience to him at the end of his life. That's what we suggest.
Ma'am, if I may add. I think what I understood from you that different regulators asked different informations. Now in this budget, it has been announced that PAN will be the single PAN for the companies, will be used as a source of information exchange between the different regulators. Plus, Madam has also announced in the budget that regulators have been requested to review their regulations, and all the issues which you are raising are very pertinent, will be taken care of that moment. At the same time, we also announced in this budget about the risk-based KYC rather than same one-size-fit-all KYC. There is another provision for this setting up of National Financial Information Registry, which will smoothen the flow of information among different regulators and different entities. Thank you.
Shri Vimlesh Gupta, President Telangana and Andhra Plastics Manufacturers Association, and CMD Vivek Polymers and Vibjr Poly Additives Private Limited is our next speaker.
Good evening. Ma'am, now I think everyone will agree that plastics is much more than just SUPs that are the single-use plastics. And my request to you, ma'am, is if you see the year 21, almost 37,500 crore worth of plastic finished goods were imported from outside, out of which almost 50% were from China. So my request to you is to propose a increase of import duty on finished goods, plastic finished goods. And time and again we get some news that government is thinking about putting some tariff and non-tariff barriers on plastic raw material and capital goods, that is machinery. So my request is that if we can reduce the import duty on capital goods and raw material, and on the other side, if you can increase it on the plastic raw finished goods. So what will happen is the MSME sector, so we are 50,000 plus industries in the plastic processing sector, and more than 90% is from the MSME sector, ma'am. So if you can consider this thing, it will help boost the MSME sector a lot. Thank you.
I now request Srimati Jyotsna Angara, Director, Electronic Smart India Limited and Independent Board Director, National Governing Body, FICCI Ladies Organization, to ask a question.
Good afternoon, ma'am, and thank you for giving us this opportunity and hearing out quite a few women, which is lovely. I represent FICCI Ladies Organization and work towards building industrial parks, manufacturing sector in the MSME sector. My question is in that regard. One, that we are focusing on 100% women-owned industry. Don't agree on 51% or 60%. So if 100% women-owned industries are there, one, it builds the property right. So with that, can we look at better benefits? That's one. Second thing is, urban women entrepreneurs' requirements are not met by the existing either the industrial policies or the other financial benefits. So can our policy framework incorporate both short-term as well as medium and long-term measures for women-owned businesses, especially in the MSME sector? Currently, they are mostly clubbed with the SCSE sector. Can some policy be introduced to incentivize organizations and companies who buy product manufactured by women-owned company? Because invariably, women find reaching out to the markets, pushing their products in the market very difficult, because we do not have that reach or the networks to push for this. And in spite of many of the women contributing a lot in the MSME sector, today they find reaching out to markets, reaching out to the banks for the credit is very difficult.
I now call upon Srimati Y. Tripuramba, founder of Association of Lady Entrepreneurs of India and proprietor Drishti Associates, to raise her query.
Namaste. I have some 3-4 points, madam. This is the right opportunity for me to speak directly. One is, the CGT MSc is revamped with infusion of 9,000 corpus and a standard reduced 1%. This is very interesting. Previously, CGT MSc Trust was meant only %, which is on a high integration of artisans, craftsmen, people with MSME. And I regularly attend the Reserve Bank of India Empowerment Committee meetings. I oppose at my directorate that the MNCs are showing the categorization of MSME differently. All the large vehicles, huge vehicles meant for logistics, are only shown as MSME, and they're surpassing the PSBs sometimes. Sometimes this categorization is uncomfortable for us. And another thing is, by adding this, the weaker section return will vanish and this whole lot will come into MSME, and the banks may not do justice for the micro and the medium industries. My next point is setting up of the DG locker. I'm not old-fashioned, and I don't oppose mechanization. Sir, after mechanization, I tell you, the depositor and the borrower's position has become very transparent. Every agency dealing with the credit cards, clearing, and insurance know our status. How safe is this DigiLocker? I would like to know. Another thing is, after creating the Skill Development Ministry, the funds are slightly diverted and entrepreneur development has been neglected. Previously, I take care of the training institute of our association, madam. The programs from science and technology which were routed through EDI Ahmedabad were no more there. And so also the EDPs are not encouraged on par. The skill is very important, so also the EDP. So I would like to conclude. Thank you.
I'd like to respond on your first point, that is on the CGT MSc. So 2 points of fact. One, there is no internal segregation between the different categories within the CGT MSc. However, as was mentioned earlier, the total utilization under the CGT MSc is below what they are eligible to lend. So there is no, it's not as if they are running up against a constraint. And in this budget, they've been given a capital infusion which will allow them to more than double the volume of lending that they can do. So it is, there is no particular quota for particular kinds within that, but that is also not a constraint on lending to anyone. The decisions are being taken by the banks. There is enough capital in the CGT MSc to service all the borrowers who are eligible under the CGT MSc. It doesn't cover medium enterprises, it covers micro and small, and that has always been the case, and that remains the present focus of the CGT MSc. You mentioned the guarantee fee of 1.27% or so, which you mentioned. That is precisely one of the things that is mentioned in the speech, that on average, from the position that was there in September 2022, this will decline by approximately 1%. There's a different slab rate depending on the size of the loan, but the average decline will be 1% from the 1.27 or whatever figure you mentioned. So that's the other highlight of this infusion of 9,000 crores in the CGT MSc. As regards the Skill Development Ministry, there has been no cut in the budget of the Skill Development Ministry. It is the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship. So from the Finance Ministry side, the budget allocations have been increasing. I think you may take this request to that ministry in terms of if you feel that the mix between entrepreneurship and skill development has to be modified. Well, it is not something that we are constraining from the Ministry of Finance. The budgets are increasing.
Now I request Sri R.K. Agrawal, National President, Bulk Drugs Manufacturers Association of India and Managing Director, Nakoda Chemicals, to ask his question.
Hello, good afternoon, ma'am. In the budget proposals of this year, Honorable Finance Minister announced support for promoting research and innovation in the pharmaceutical sector. Industry highly welcomes this announcement and compliments the Honorable Finance Minister. The details of the schemes are being worked out, they are under discussion and they are awaited. At this point, I would like to say that bulk drug industry is a science-based industry, and day in and day out, every company has to have his own private research laboratory to stay in business, to update their product specification and to do a product upgradation on a routinely basis. Other than innovation of the new product, even the existing product needs continuously upgradation and improvisation in order to stay in the business and being, because it's a global industry and science-based industry, the global specifications and needs are changing for the betterment. So our suggestion is that this support which is being extended for innovation should also be extended to the product development and the in-house research which the individual companies are doing. Thank you very much.
Now we come to our last speaker, Shri Rajiv Julakanti, Head of FICCI Telangana State Council.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Thank you very much. I would like to put forward a request from the EV industry. Inverted GST duty structure for electric bus segment continues to be challenged for the OEMs.
Can you keep your mic closer?
Sorry, ma'am. Yeah. Currently, the output tax of e-buses is 5%, and input tax on the major inputs varies between 18 to 24%. Sorry, 28%. The request is there any possibility of reducing or lowering the input tax on the EV industry?
How can it be reduced? When you reduce the tax on an input, see, GST doesn't work on an end-use principle. It doesn't say that if a component is used for this purpose, then the tax is so much if it is used for that. And therefore, it's very difficult when there's a common input which goes both into electric and non-electric vehicles or into something else. To have differential rates based on end use is a recipe for a lot of A, evasion, B, administrative harassment of taxpayers. It will be very difficult to do. And in fact, the whole move in GST has been away from such complexities. So if there is something that is exclusive to e-vehicles, that is something that I'm sure the GST Council might be able to look at. But to say that on this basis, numerous complications can come in various kinds of products, where an input which you share with some other industry, that's going to be very difficult to rebate. But I don't know if you want to add.
No, absolutely. I mean, if there is any specific input which is specific or exclusively used for EVs, then, perhaps that can be considered. I thought perhaps you are wanting a reduction of the 5% rate, on EVs. Others, see, we have to have a standard rate. You are aware of that.
That brings us to the end of the session.
I'd just like to add one point which I omitted on the DigiLocker. Madam, like you, I'm also, not an expert. I'm also quite old and I'm not an expert on DigiLockers. But I will say this much, that nothing is shared through the DigiLocker unless you say that you want to share it. So DigiLocker is secure to you. You put your material on the DigiLocker. If you wish for your convenience to share it to somebody, then instead, and which is something that we actually do in the old-fashioned way every day. We give somebody our passport number, we give our Aadhaar card, we give our bank statement. It is not that we do not do these things. This is an alternative method of sharing what you want to share. With your permission, you can use the DigiLocker to share something that you wish to share. It does not automatically share anything from the DigiLocker, and the Ministry of Electronics has taken all the possible precautions in terms of certification, data security, digital security. All that has been done. So that's just my limited response to what you said.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for Thanks for the clarification. Madam, this opportunity I may not get again. Micro industries, they cannot sustain the NPA norms anymore. So also the rating norms. Actually, all micro industries should be rated by the bank itself and not by the external agencies. And the Sarkozy Act impact is also too much for them. So from Constitution, either you should take away the micro or you should tell the bankers to treat micro differently. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. We'll certainly take that up.
Thank you, ma'am. We have to end the session. I thank Honorable Finance Minister, respected dignitaries on the dais, and the invitees for making this interaction mutually enriching and meaningful. The questions which could not be taken up today may please be forwarded to the email ID hyderabad.dcit.hq@incometax.gov.in, and these will be forwarded to the ministry. Thank you. I now hand over to Ms. Manisha.
Thank you, Madam. I now request Commissioner of Income Tax, Administration and Taxpayer Services, Hyderabad, Shri K. Ravi Kiran, to kindly deliver the vote of thanks.
Respected dignitaries on the dais, delegates present in the audience, good afternoon. I sincerely thank the Honorable Union Finance and Corporate Affairs Minister, Srimati Nirmala Sitharaman, for chairing today's post-budget interaction with stakeholders from trade, commerce and industry. Madam, your inputs on questions posed by the delegates has provided great clarity on the detailed and elaborate thought process that has gone into the preparing this budget. I also thank the Honorable Minister of State for Finance, Shri Pankaj Chaudhary, Honorable Minister of State for Finance, Shri Bhagwat Kishan Rao Karad, and all the dignitaries on the dais for providing their feedback on the issues raised during today's conference. I also thank the attending delegates from various industry associations for attending the conference. The diverse range and depth of questions posed by the delegates has truly made the conference a productive, engaging, and fruitful affair. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. With this, the session now draws to a close. I request everyone to please rise for the national anthem.
अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तव जय गाथा जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे
Thank you, everyone. I request you all to kindly remain seated till Honorable